So we're going back in time now to one of my favorite stories, and that is the story of Samuel. Samuel is arguably one of the last great judges of Israel. But of course, in order to do that, I got to kind of unpack it a little bit, and we're going to have fun today. We're going to go back all the way to just to give you a bit of a timeline of what we're talking about. So when we're talking about uh, Samuel, the story of Samuel, you'll have an idea of when and where we are. So if you go back to about 1400 BC, approximately, uh, Moses had just died, and then he was passing the torch to Joshua. And then a few years after that, Joshua dies and passes the torch to basically anyone anyone that would take the mantle. And that's what we call the era of the judges. So Joshua had allocated all the land based on how big the tribes were and how small the tribes were. So it got allocated, and the first three tribes to get their land was on the other side of the Jordan. I call that kind of, sometimes I've mentioned that the territory of the Philistines have actually, from time to time, it actually expand all the way across the land of Israel and across the Jordan across the Jordan River into an area that was called Jordan. So that's where King Saul and his son Jonathan were hung on the wall. So they weren't even in their territory in Gaza and all that region in Gath. They actually were spreading out like gangrene. This is why this time frame is so serious by the time we get to Samuel, because the Philistines were not just staying in their area, they were occupying portions of the land of Canaan, which later gets occupied by Israel as promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the era of the judges is about 300 years. And when we get to Samuel, you're looking at basically the last greatest judge. And Samuel is basically a bridge from the era of the judges to the era of the kings. And it's interesting because Moses talks about this, and he says, one day you're going to ask for a king. If you do, here's the rules. Here's how it's going to work. He's going to have to read the scriptures daily. That's part of the rule later. Once we find and determine where a place is that you are to worship, that and whoever that king is, whoever that leader is, that person is to read the scriptures daily, meditate on his word. So when we're talking about the book of Samuel, traditionally, Samuel is the one that wrote it, at least until he died. Then we have other prophets that have actually been attributed to writing First and Second Samuel, and that would be Nathan, and then Gad, and then this is kind of an interesting note that Jeremiah traditionally is the one to have been said to have written the book of Kings, First and Second Kings, and then of course Ezra for Chronicles. And that's historically, that's what scholars believe. Is it sure looks like this, because obviously there's a transition where Moses is handing the baton to Joshua. So obviously Joshua wrote the last little bit of Moses' life and filled in some of the blanks to end Deuteronomy, because it would be weird to have Moses write everything to the end of Deuteronomy and then die. So that's again, that's tradition, and I have no problem with that at all. So when we get to the time frame of King David, you're looking at about 1000 BC, and then about 970 approximately is when King Solomon comes into power to be arguably one of the last kings that has all 12 tribes under under one king, which is so fascinating to me because that's literally like 3,000 years, and even today Israel doesn't have a king. They have a prime minister. So when we get to Samuel, we have a lady who is not able to have a child. Her husband, Elkanah, has two wives, and one of them is not able to have a child, and that is Hannah. So Hannah goes to the tabernacle, which is in Shiloh, according to Joshua, I think chapter 18, where basically they set up the tabernacle of Moses. I think sometimes when we're reading the beginning of Samuel and we see the priest there, we automatically think the temple, but the temple is not built yet. It's not built till later, till King Solomon's time. But Shiloh was a temporary place of worship for the Israelites until a time when God would determine a a area and a city of where they were to eventually worship, like the entire nation of Israel, and in fact other nations were eventually to come to worship. That, of course, is Jerusalem. But what's interesting about that is Jerusalem is actually occupied right now, and they fought. Israel fought hard to try and take over that city. They just couldn't with the Jebusites. Remember, there's a whole bunch of Vites in in the Old Testament, where you got the Hivites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, like lots of sites to take in. But when we're talking about Jerusalem, Jerusalem is actually encompassed by the area of the tribe of Benjamin and Judah, because there was a huge population of the people from the tribe of Judah. I think it was a cool thing to have huge families, because one of your families could actually end up genetically uh, being the future ancestor of the Messiah, because there's lots of prophecies coming from that the Messiah is coming from the tribe of Judah. So Judah was expanding, and some of the other tribes were actually really small. Dan was really small when they had their allotment. It was so small that they had to move to northern Israel, and we talked about that in a previous video, where they just slaughtered a bunch of innocent people. So the tribe, whenever you're looking at geography when it comes to Israel, when you're going through the Bible, a lot of times you'll see uh, from Bethel to Dan, basically you're going all the way from the south uh, of the northern tribes. So that would be like a border where Bethel is. That's where one of the golden calves was erected by uh, Jeroboam, which was arguably one of the first kings when the tribes of Israel split into two. So I know, again, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm jumping all over, but I want to give you kind of an idea of the area of the map. So the northern part of Israel is Dan. And then the southern part would be like Hebron and below that, or not Hebron. Just depending who's talking, it's usually like um, Dan to Beersheba. So because Judah occupied a lot of the southern region, it was massive. the area of Judah is massive. So eventually, you just think of the southern tribes, which would be Judah, which also encompasses um, Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, and Simeon later. It's almost like Judah absorbs the area of Simeon. Again, this is all allocation by Joshua. So when the split happened, you have the 10 northern tribes, which will be called Israel, and then the two southern tribes, which comprise of Benjamin and Judah, and then arguably the Levites when they get kicked out of Israel and they come to the southern part. I know a lot of spinning plates, isn't it? But just so you have a bit of a context of what we're talking about, because later in other videos, when I say Israel, I'm going to be referring to the 10 northern tribes or Ephraim or Joshua. Because in Revelation, Ephraim is not listed, but Joshua is listed, which is interesting because that represents throughout history. You have again the 10 northern tribes, which could intertwine with the name Joshua, Ephraim, or Israel, and Jacob. So no wonder people get confused. It gets confusing after a while. Um, anyways, okay, so we got to get to Samuel. So Samuel's mom was barren, and came to an area called Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle was set up. And there was one day where Hannah was praying so hard, so fervently, that her eyes were closed and her lips were moving. And Eli would sit in his chair in front of the tabernacle, and he was a heavy man, a fat man, an obese man. And he would look at her, he'd mark her lips, he'd pay attention to her lips. And he's like, you know what? This lady's drunk. She's drunk. So because I'm a leader, I'm a priest, I'm the head of the priesthood, I'm going to share some advice. So he said to Hannah, he's like, Hannah, you gotta get off the bottle. You gotta stop drinking. Like it's not good for you. It's not a good habit. Don't do this. Hannah said, no, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not drinking. I've been praying fervently for a child. I want a child so bad. And Eli said, you know what? May it be according to your word, to what you want. May the Lord grant you a child. And she left, and wouldn't you know it, she got pregnant. And so her husband said to her, Hannah, I'm going to Bethel. I'm going to pay my vows and all this kind of stuff. And are you coming with me? And she's like, no, I am actually staying here because my plan is to, when I have this child, I am going to nurse him. And once he is able to be dedicated to the Lord, I'm actually going to bring him to Eli, and I'm going to leave him there. I'm going to let Eli take care of him. And usually what happens when a woman makes a vow back in the days of Israel, if the husband says something like, I disagree with that vow, you can't do this, he would speak up. If he holds his peace, then the vow is basically solidified. But if he speaks and says, I disagree, then it becomes nullified. So Samuel's dad agreed with it, which means Hannah was allowed to dedicate Samuel to the Lord, basically lending her son to the Lord, not sacrificing her son, but dedicating. And usually what they would do is they would give an offering at, at the tabernacle, dedicate an animal or something, and then they would fulfill their vows. So when he got old enough, she brought Samuel to Eli and basically said, "Here you go, Eli." So he was young. I don't know how old he would have been, but if I were to guess, I would say Eli was probably about 6 to 10 years old, in that range. Very, very young, because we see from year to year, Hannah's making a coat for Samuel, and year to year she had to bring another jacket for him because he was growing out of his previous jacket. So that tells me he's in that age where he's actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger till his teenage years. But at the beginning, when he was very young, the reason why I think he was like 6 to 10 years old. Let's see what historians see. So yeah, so depending which historian, traditionally the argument is anywhere from he could be 3 to 5 years old, he could be 10 to 12, because of the idea that a child, whenever you see a child mentioned in scripture, we see Jesus as a child in listening to the doctors in his day, as doctors of the word. Basically, these are the smartest, the tippity top of scholars, and Jesus would listen to them and ask them questions, and he was 12. So when we get references to a child, we can look at approximately 10 to 12 years old, but a child that is weaned traditionally could be around 3 to 5 years old. So I have no problem with the idea that Samuel would be like 5 years old, 5, 6 years old. By the time he heard the Lord, he obviously was able to walk, because he would go to Eli whenever it'd be the middle of the night, and then God would speak to Samuel, and Samuel would get out of his bed and go over to Eli and say, "Here I am." And poor Eli, trying to get his sleep. He's got lots of things on his mind. The lamp of the Lord is basically dwindling, is going out, symbolically and literally, because his job was to make sure that the lamp of the Lord was burning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was literally going out at night when the Lord spoke to Samuel, because the word in those days was precious. It was rare to hear from the Lord. It's almost like a famine in the land spiritually. So Samuel would come to Eli, "Here I am." And the first time, Eli's like, "Hey, dude, I love you, but I need my beauty rest. Go back to sleep. Go, go back to sleep. Count to 1,000 sheep." That's probably where that concept came from, is Eli probably told that to Samuel. Just count sheep, for crying out loud. Next day, same thing. Here, Samuel, and Samuel goes to Eli again and goes, "Here I am." It took a little while because, again, Eli's not used to hearing from the Lord. So then he figured it out, and he's like, "You know what, Samuel, the next time you hear a voice from the Lord, just say, 'Here I am,' to the Lord. Speak." And so basically, that was the wisdom that Eli had for Samuel. So I think it's just wisdom from Eli to just say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And so um, Samuel went back to bed, and the Lord said, Samuel. And Samuel said, Speak, Lord, for I'm listening. And the Lord said, I'm going to do something fantastical, amazing, that um so amazing, and it's hard to express what this is. This is not so much a exciting time, but it's something that God is going to be doing, if that makes sense. Like, it would make your ears tingle if you were to sit down and listen to the story. You're like, God is going to do something amazing. And Eli had no idea what he was talking about, but what God was saying is, I'm going to snuff out the light of Eli's family. And that's what God was communicating to this young man, this young boy, Samuel, saying, your teacher, I'm going to snuff out his family. His two sons are done. They're going to be cut off. And in fact, Eli is going to be cut off as well, because of their wickedness. It's not going to be forever. It's not going to be forever. So imagine getting this, your first message, as like, again, arguably between 6 and 12 years old. So then the next morning, I think Eli was on to Samuel, as in, I know God told you something, because you're acting weird now. You're acting a little bit different now around me. So tell me, what did God say to you? Samuel's basically, yeah, I just didn't really say too much. Got a little hot, a little bit nervous. And Eli's like, listen, you little punk. Whatever he said to you, I'm going to do to you unless you tell me what he said. So Samuel said, well, your sons are going to die, and you're going to die. And then Eli's like, oh, well, whatever the Lord's going to do, he's going to do. So that was Samuel's first induction into prophecy. And this is why Samuel's actually considered a prophet judge. Like, this guy was, everybody was in fear and awe and respect of Samuel, because he was the last great judge. So in the next video, we're going to talk about that transition phase of basically Samuel having to look for a king. And this is a sad time for us when we're reading the book of Samuel. We're like, oh, this is exciting times and stuff. But for Samuel, he was crying every single night, because the Israelites said, we don't even like your sons, because Samuel's sons weren't following, they weren't judging correctly either. So they said, we want a king like um, Esau and their descendants have, like the Ammonites have a king, like the Moabites have a king. We have no king. Everyone else around us has a king, so we want a king. And Moses predicted that, arguably 300 years earlier, saying that one day you're going to want a king, but you have to choose a king amongst yourself, and ask me, and I'll find a king for you. So instead, the people wanted a king for themselves, but not because they wanted to be closer to God, but because they wanted to be protected, and they wanted to be like other nations. They felt that they needed a king at this time. So Samuel cried nightly, weeping, mourning. And because I think he felt that they were rejecting him as the judge. Because God says to Samuel, Why are you weeping? They haven't rejected you. They've rejected me as their king. I am their king. So give them what they want. Give them what they want. And they wanted a mighty king. They wanted a king that would bring them all the glory, that would unite all 12 tribes together. And it's kind of interesting today, and I think in future videos, I'm going to start talking about Israel today. They're looking forward to having a king, which we believe is the Antichrist. They're looking forward, and it's interesting that the Muslims are looking forward to their Messiah. And one day they're going to get what they ask for. They want a military type leader to be able to control the whole world and give them riches and wealth and fame and everything. And they're going to God's going to give them what they want, because that's how God works. If whatever's in your heart, if you desire God, he's going to give you more of him. If you want other things, other idols, he's going to give you more of that, if that's what's in your heart. So in the next video, we're going to continue to dive in to the transition from Samuel to the first king. And then we're going to get obviously to King David and King Solomon. So this will be fun in the next few episodes. So after this one, we're going to take a bit of a break for a few days, gather some of my thoughts together, because again, this is one of my favorite stories. And I think a lot of this stuff will tie into what's going on with today with Israel and with Iran. So tune in the next episode, and whatever video you see clicking around here, watch those videos as well. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.